if you add the way the media is hyping it, I mean, I've been spot checking CNN, MSNBC, and others, and they are behaving as if it is the end of the world. Last Friday, I was watching MSNBC again, and it was the same thing I saw the night before. They cut to reporters on the beach, and there was just a tiny patina, kind of like scum you'll get in your bathtub if you don't clean it for a couple of weeks. There was just a little line, maybe a foot wide, up on the high water mark of the tide mark, where oil had been brought into the Florida Panhandle, and they were acting like it was the end of the world, actually hyperventilating. And last week I had one of my mistakes on air. I always get names flipped around. It wasn't Corbin. That guy died from a stingray, or whatever his name was. I don't remember. It's the other one that's still alive who's an American. He's got dark hair. What's that guy's name who runs around in the bush? And he's a big environmentalist, always demonizing humans at the end of the show. It doesn't matter. They have one of those nature guys on. I don't watch a lot of television. And he literally went for 10 minutes without taking a breath, just saying that these beaches are never coming back. These estuaries are never coming back. These fisheries and marshes are never coming back, ever. I mean, I thought it was the end of the world if I didn't know better. The truth is, oil is toxic, but it's very biodegradable, and there are a lot of different species of bacteria that are naturally occurring. In fact, that was the Obama administration's excuse for not spraying oil-eating microbes on it, as they pointed out, well, there are hundreds and hundreds in the Gulf, different varieties of bacteria and other microbes that eat oil, so most of this oil will be eaten up in a few years. And that's true. But not before it comes in and really hurts the fishing, not before it comes in and really causes a problem. And if you don't clean up most of it when it's out to sea, when it all stacks up and gets blown into shore by hurricanes, if you get any fraction, 10, 20, 30%, and they're reporting that conservatively that's probably what's going to come in when some big hurricanes hit, you take 20, 30, 40 million gallons of oil and you dump that on the Louisiana, Mississippi, Florida coast, and then it goes around through the Keys and up the East Coast, it is going to be hellish. And some of that oil is going to go around the world. I'll guarantee you in 10 years, some of that stuff's going to be washing up on the Pacific side of South America and the United States. In fact, I've seen giant tar balls. A few months ago, I was down at the Texas beach, and there was a tar ball probably the size. My dad took a picture of it. He went down there with us fishing with the kids. It was probably the size of a football. And it was this big blob, but it was hard, of tar, of old oil. And it had mollusks growing on it. It had barnacles. It had little worms. It had, I mean, that thing was a floating island of life. And who knows where it came from. But it was as hard as a rock. And there were all these creatures living on it. So I would imagine a decade from now, there'll be big tar balls floating up. But most of it is going to be eaten. But if it blows into shore while it's still off-gassing, it's going to be a crisis. And there probably will be some towns that people got to move back, 10, 15 miles. But you know the government. They love a good crisis. They love an excuse to come in with troops, boss people around, go into houses, rob people's homes. Remember what police all over Louisiana, Mississippi got caught doing on video? Going in, ripping the front doors off pawn shops and jewelry stores and stealing the safes, going into Walmart, running everybody else out who was stealing so they could steal, filling their carts with television sets. I mean, let's face it, America on average is very decadent and very immoral. And police are made up of decadent, immoral people. Not all of them, but they're made up of a sampling of what the United States has turned into. And you've got great officers out there, but more and more they protect the goons. They promote the thugs, the lowest common denominator, that'll follow orders and then enjoy meting out oppression because that's what the system wants. And so when that oil, I mean, if they're acting like it's the end of the world on CNN, MSNBC, and Fox to some extent, and CNBC, if they're breathless talking about the tiny fraction of oil that's already hit, and it is a problem. If they've already 10 miles inland in Louisiana, Mississippi, and other areas declared it a federal disaster area and are telling people they can't fish. I mean, I see it in the news every day where families 10 miles in are bass fishing on vacation in completely beautiful blue lakes that are connected to the ocean waterways. And the BP people, the local police, the game wardens, the Coast Guard comes up and says, you can't fish here, get off this lake. Any excuse to boss people around. But then 10 miles away, where the oil's coming in, we're now almost 80 days. What is it? Day 76, 77? They are not letting people clean up the oil. The religion of government is setting up a precedent to expand their jurisdiction. Criminally, illegally, illegitimately. And so they expanded their jurisdiction in New Orleans. They went in, didn't bring in food and water, blocked people from getting it, wouldn't let people exit the city, wouldn't let them walk out over the highways, ordered police to shoot and kill families trying to come out. We told you at the time, Charles in Louisiana, he's been calling in for 13 years, a good source of info, sent us a lot of good info over the years. He called in and said, well, today, Mr. Jones, they shot some people, peaceful families, trying to get out, trying to walk over the highway system, which is high and dry, and they shot them. And a year later, it came out there'd been a cover-up, and then it had happened. And 3 years after that, some of the police officers that followed the orders, they're still guilty, but not as guilty as those that gave the orders to them, to shoot those people and drive back a crowd of men, women, and children trying to get out. You're not going to get out. They've set the precedent that they can either tell you to get out when you don't need to leave, or they can lock you down in a city and make you stay there. 76 days in. 76 days in. And where are the Norwegian and the Dutch and the Taiwanese and the Japanese and the German and the Brazilian mega ships that can come in and suck up tens of thousands of barrels a day individually, some of the ships, 250,000 barrels, 300,000, 400,000 barrels in one ship, 500,000 barrels a day. And I just keep beating that drum because this is a crisis they're not going to let go to waste. They need this ecological disaster to hammer through their takeover of all Western industry. When you hear green industry, that means the government says what type of industry you can have. That means they say you've got to buy this type of generator or this type of electrical transmission system, or you can't have that type of factory, or you can't have this type of house, or you can't have that type of business, or you can't have a pond on your property. This is total feudalism and serfdom. And they're announcing it in Europe. Can't have a space heater outside. Can't have a fireplace. You've got to have a zero carbon footprint home. Families aren't allowed to live in a home by themselves. That's too wasteful. You must all live in dormitories. I've got stacks of mainstream news here today in front of me where they now admit in England, London Telegraph, they're all reporting on it, that the government does indeed have quotas of absolutely innocent families and their newborn babies before the babies are born. They're even looking for hair color, eye color, you name it, for rich families that are going to adopt them. Of course, we are harvested by government. And I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, I know you know this. In fact, I said I was going to get to this, and I am now. Then we're going to come back and take phone calls from people that have specific intel on preparations for evacuation. In the Gulf states, specific information. It doesn't be specific information that it's going to happen or that you've told it's going to be something that's taking place in the near future. It just needs to be whether you've been told that it's a possibility. Or if you have been told they're preparing for it, what those preparations are. 1-800-259-9231. 1-800-259-9231 is the toll-free number to join us. Again, 800-259-9231. Boy, I tell you, 2 days being off and coming back in here and looking at all this news this morning and reading over this, my head is spinning. What about yours?